Hi everyone, it's me Josie Parwin, and on Agitprop I really wanted to explore different areas of my interests. I categorize things in food, lifestyle, travel and culture, but for me it was always trying to connect with spirituality and all of my other kind of loves and hobbies. When I was looking at people to interview in terms of my food area of YouTube and my food area of my website, I really wanted to find someone that I could discuss a little bit more than just the traditional foodie questions. And I stumbled across an amazing plant-based and intuitive chef called Sal. So she is the food witch and she is an incredible lady, and I was very intrigued to hear more about her process of preparing food and what she does. So please check it out here. So I always try and start with people's stories. Like, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a very nice part of southwest London called Hampton.
Okay.
Which is near Hampton Court Palace.
I've been there.
Yeah, so it's a really, really beautiful, quiet suburb. And I was just really lucky that my parents moved us there when I was really, really young, 2, 3. And we stayed in that house after my parents got divorced. So I grew up in that house from the age of 2 to the age of 18 when I left home, which was lovely, and I got to walk to school and all of that really wholesome stuff, which was really beautiful and lovely, and really set me up well to sort of have a nice sort of education and upbringing and nice family life, which was lovely.
Did you feel growing up that you had a passion for cooking? Like, when did it start that you decided that this was the kind of job you wanted to do?
Kind of yes and kind of no. So I think if you'd have asked me at any point from the age of 3 to the age of 10 what I wanted to be, the answer would have been a chef. But I think realistically, it wasn't something that I really thought I would ever do. Both my parents are doctors, my sister's a doctor, my aunt's a doctor, my other aunt trained as a lawyer and is now sort of an executive in business, and they're all sort of very academic and very high achieving. And because my family also really, food and cooking was a huge part of our culture, it kind of just seemed, almost like there was no career in that, and that was just life and family. And yeah, sure, I loved food, but actually there were valuable, important things that I should be doing that weren't, naffing around in a kitchen full time. So I think I kind of subconsciously suppressed the fact that was my passion until I was in my mid-20s when I was working as a management consultant and, really just not finding a lot of meaning and purpose in life. And, I think rather than knowing that food was my career, I think I always knew that I wanted to do something that was meaningful and would sort of connect me and help me make a difference with other people. And, not even necessarily on like a huge, life, world changing level, but on a level of, using something that I had to make a difference and sort of feeling like I had made my own contribution to society or the world or whatever it would be in the end. And I think it was not feeling that in what I was doing, as a management consultant working in finance, just sort of wanting something more and something more fulfilling and a bit more tangible, that I started to think maybe I should pursue something that I was passionate about and that, made my heart sing and, that I wanted to spend every day doing rather than sitting at a desk bashing away at spreadsheets. So, it was in my mid-20s that I really decided that I was going to have a career in food. And I think up until that point, I'd just been sort of repressing those dreams.
I think that's so interesting because it mimics in some ways my personal journey with my kind of transition with my work online, because I think a lot of people were quite shocked that I wanted to start learning to cook in a public way with my blog and start to discuss food, because people knew me from makeup, and I've got to my mid-20s when I was like, this is just not... I did it because it was the only kind of thing I could get my foot in the door with. It wasn't really a passion. And when I was younger, I was the only person in my family that was vegetarian, and I couldn't actually eat meat. It made me very poorly as a baby. So I grew up with the kind of like this fear around food. And then when I was staying with my grandparents, my grandma would teach me how to cook cakes. And whenever I was with her, I would always find that food was really a positive experience. And it's now she's passed away, it's what I feel memories of. And I think that people have this link to food and preparing something that someone else can enjoy that is so healing. And I think it kind of sounds like I kind of where you were when you decided to go into it for that kind of purpose. So I know that I'm a trained or fabulous cook by any stretch of the imagination. I'm still very much learning how to do things, but I'm very intrigued to hear when people have that moment where they decide, okay, this is my focus and this is what I want to go forward with.
Well, so interestingly, I think, my journey kind of has two steps, because when I first, there was the moment of deciding that I was going to follow my dream and follow my passion. But there was also, and I know this now, that with that comes a whole lot of other questions and sort of, self-development and internal work that needs to be done. You need to have a very specific mindset and constitution to work for yourself, rather than working for somebody else, and to also make your dream and your passion what you do. It requires, you to have a very specific kind of relationship with yourself, and, a level of honesty and intuition that I definitely didn't have. So when I first became a chef, it was, what should I do? What is everybody else doing? What would be a good business to have? And so I didn't necessarily do the things that I'm doing now, which I really love to do, but I did the things that I thought on paper would make me a success, or that would gain approval from my family, or gain approval from random other people whose opinions I decided were important. And so, don't get me wrong, I love baking, so I started a bakery, and, I was selling food to produce and doing catering, but that still wasn't really my passion. My passion is about sort of our connection to food, and in like you were saying, that sort of energetic transfer that you can, affect from, making something for somebody else or eating something that's made with love. There's so much power in food, and I wasn't really able to make much of that just by making stuff for people to eat. I felt like I had much more creativity and much more sort of philosophy, I guess, in me that I wanted to look into and share and make something out of. And it was that desire to get some meaning and purpose from what I did that I was still missing. There was part of me that was really frustrated, because I was like, I've left this 6-figure career where I was really doing really well. I was really good at it. The only problem was I just hated it. I left this amazing job. I could have had everything made to become a chef and do what I loved, and yet I wasn't making any money and I was miserable. And I was like, what's happened? Like, this isn't what I set out for when I decided to follow my dream. And so I started working with a life coach and a business coach, and it was suddenly sort of realizing that was all of this conditioning and sort of subconscious stuff that was affecting my mindset and the way that I saw myself, that was really stopping me from even knowing what it was that I wanted to do, that would fill me with joy and bring me purpose. And it was amazingly sort of the amalgamation of that plus the work that I did on myself that made me realize that it was really simple to frame our relationship with food through a lot of the tools and ideas that coaches use to help with self-development. And a lot of that really applies to our relationship with food. And it really inspired me to sort of pull out all of this this thinking and this philosophy and this idea about sort of having an intuitive relationship with food that goes far beyond intuitive eating. And that's sort of over the last 2 or 3 years that I've been developing all of that stuff since I worked with that life coach for a year. So it's really, really interesting how these stages of these things developed, and it really did take me quite a long time to figure out what my real, I guess what my gift was and what I was here to share with the world.
Very interesting. You mentioned your heritage and culture at the beginning. Do you want to talk a little bit about what food was like in terms of your culture?
Yeah, so my family is from East Africa. So my grandma's from Zanzibar, and my granddad is from mainland Tanzania. And we're from, so I guess ancestrally, we're Gujarati. So we are Asian, but have a African background. And then my family came over here in the 70s. So my mum was born in Africa, my dad was born in Africa, and I guess in a similar way to how we fit into society now, they were relatively well off in Africa. My granddad had businesses, they had a good life relative to, I guess, a lot of Africans. But that certainly wasn't the case when they came here, and they lived in, really hard conditions, much harder and much sort of more poverty than they were used to. But what was really interesting is that so much of the food that they ate in Africa is just so humble and simple and, mostly vegetarian or relatively simple use of meat, not a lot of it. And so eating our food wasn't that expensive here comparatively. There were things that they could eat, rice, lentils, that kind of stuff. And so our food culture came with us. And I think, as with any community, big or small, that moves, food is the thing that makes you feel at home. It's the thing that makes you feel like, you've got your community and you've got some familiarity. So I think eating the food that they ate in Africa here was always just a given to my family. And my grandma never really cooked European food. She still only really cooks East African food. And really, really lucky as well that I've grown up with this mix of East African and Indian heritage, because the food that we eat is very, very unique to the sort of heritage that is behind it. So Zanzibar's on the spice trail. We have a lot of Gujarati influences in the food, but the bulk of it is using African staple ingredients. So a lot of coconut, a lot of fresh spices instead of dried ones. So it's very, very different to Indian food, very, very different to African food. And it's very sort of unique, amazing, delicious cuisine. And so from the moment I was born, I grew up eating my grandma's food, if not every Friday at a family dinner, then several times a week. They live next door to us or in our house for my entire life. So my grandma's always been around. She's the most amazing cook. At least when it comes to African food, like she's had a few howlers when we've tried to get her to cook European food, and even now 30 years later her fish in white sauce is still infamous in our family, and like there are people that weren't alive when she made it that still know how dreadful it was.
Oh goodness.
But at the same time she would let us make chapatis with her on a Friday for the family dinner, and it's like so many of my fondest memories of childhood are either cooking with my grandma or watching her cook, sharing family meals, eating, out, trying things. Just all of my joy, basically, from childhood and now into adult life is basically centered around food. And so it's been a massive part of my life, and it still is, and it's still such a massive part of our family. And, we've just made this, my aunt decided that none of us had enough of a handle on my grandma's recipes. And, she's nearly 90, and she'll cook for 20 people, no problem. But we're also, aware that at some point we might need to be able to replicate her dishes on our own.
Yes.
So my aunt spent the last couple of years making all of us spend time with my grandma, write down the recipes, try them out, take photos. And now we've got this family cookbook, which is all of our favourite curries and dals and rice dishes that my grandma's made throughout our lives. And we all now have this compendium so that we can preserve her amazing cooking for posterity.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
It's fabulous. It's so good. And I honestly, when I go on retreats, I take a copy on my phone with me, and I'll just, look up a curry and make that for the guests on a retreat, because I just know how good her food is. And it's just so nice to be able to, share that, and, I adapt the recipes to my own, or, make my own sort of versions of them. And it's just something so, when I'm cooking a version of one of her curries for 20 people on a retreat, and none of these people know her, but somehow from, you know, all of these years of growing up eating her food, I'm getting to now share some of that with people that have no idea where it came from.
It's almost like a ritual, I think, preparing food. My family are kind of not, my sister's, well, my brother-in-law, he wasn't familiar with, like, we eat on, like, every event that there is in the year. So there's, like, a holiday like Easter, my grandma would prepare, like, a big meal for us all. So I totally relate to what you're saying. And tomorrow, I've insisted, since I'm with all of them, that we're going to do a family meal. And my niece, who is now 2, she gets to experience a little bit of what we kind of experienced growing up. So it's so true what you're saying. And it's food has that magical quality that you can kind of instill memory in people. And I always think that when I speak about fragrance, when I develop and I work with makeup artists and we're talking about making products with the fragrance has got it's got such a powerful link to memory. Are there any like Zanzibar inspired dishes that just hit you and you go, oh my God, that just reminds me of being back home in my grandma's kitchen when she was preparing this? Like, what are your staples?
So there's one thing which, although we don't cook a lot at home, is such a like genetic part of our familial joy of food that even just the smell of it microwaving from the freezer is one of those things that I still remember. So there's these little fried street snacks from East Africa, and they're called tumbwa. And basically what it is, it's like a fermented rice and coconut batter that you put yeast and cardamom and sugar in. And you just kind of deep fry these, and then you blitz it up. So it's like a really sort of liquidy, yeasty, kind of like a crumpet. But then you make these fried balls of it. And they're just like almost burnt on the outside and like so fluffy and sweet and soft and cardamomy on the inside. And they're like quite difficult to make. I don't think I've seen anyone in my family make them. But what we would do is we would get like the, you know, elderly lady of the community that was available would just make them in droves, and then people would go and buy them and collect them. So we would like stock our freezers with them. And just the smell of like when they get hot in the microwave, and it's like you can smell like the oil and the sugar of these things. It's like such a specific to that particular treat. And occasionally if I get hold of one now, it just like it fills my heart with glee as soon as I can smell it heating up.
Sounds delicious.
So yeah, they're so good, honestly. They're so delicious. And I think, funnily enough, I think frying is probably the smell that reminds me of my grandma's cooking, because all of my favourite things, particularly from being a child, that she used to make were deep fried. Samosas, these little coconut donut things. She would make these meatballs that she would deep fry. They were delicious. And everyone would complain because the house would stink of oil and their clothes would smell. And on a Friday night, they wouldn't want to come to the house. My whole family would come and they'd all be complaining of the smell of oil. And for me, the smell of oil in the house just means like something delicious. And I don't care. I just don't care if my clothes smell. It means I'm going to eat something like that. It's just like not even on my radar that I might make my clothes smell.
Yes. If it tastes good, who the hell cares about the smell of things?
But also all of my family have got hair and I don't, so they would all get annoyed that their hair would smell of frying for
That's
days.
That's true. This is the benefit with me. I just stick on a new wig if I cook with one and swap to another.
There you go. I can just shave mine off and start completely afresh.
Yes. So you studied at Leaf School of Food and Wine, and you just mentioned that you now do retreats. So how does your work kind of manifest today? Because you work with people, don't you? It's not just you prepare food and then you kind of leave. You have more of an interactive experience with a lot of what you do. I just wondered if you could talk a bit about like what you offer to people if they were interested in working with you.
Yeah, so obviously for the moment, my residential retreats are not possible. So those are just off the table for now. The other thing that I do when I'm not on retreat is teaching. So that's sort of where I'm focusing now to sort of try and reorientate my business with something that can be done online. So I do sort of a bunch of stuff on Instagram, like live cook-alongs. And the thing that I've literally just launched today on my website is I've started a series of like intuitive cooking, live online workshops. So it's not about recipes or about sort of particular dishes. It's like how you can get the most out of ingredients, with techniques and concepts and ideas that you can then apply to all sorts of different vegetables and stuff throughout the seasons. So it's more like trying to empower people to free themselves from recipes and following along and getting stressed about ingredients and things like that, because for me that takes all of the joy out of cooking. And what I love about food is just looking in my fridge, figuring out what I want, making it a reality and it being delicious. And for me, so much of people's reluctance to get involved in the kitchen is that specific barrier of not trusting themselves and their intuition and feeling like they don't know what they're doing, when a lot of it is just about sort of being mindful and concentrating on what you're doing and not getting distracted or wrapped up in other things. So the workshop should be fun, and then I'm doing online virtual retreats as well. So we've just done one, which was really, really fun. It was just a day of escapism, where we try and fill your day with various sessions to keep you on a relaxed and mindful track, with sort of plenty of free time in between. So we had yoga, meditation, we had some sort of mindfulness and journaling work, and then I did a cook along for lunch when we all ate lunch together. It was just really, really nice and actually a really nice way to connect to people, which feels really hard to do at the moment. So that was really, really fun. And then in the sort of background, whilst I'm doing all of this fun online stuff, I'm also writing a couple of ebooks, which I'm going to put on Kindle and hopefully on Amazon as well quite soon. So hopefully some reading material coming up too.
Perfect. And you can find that all at thefoodwitch.uk, which...
Yes, The Food Witch.
Perfect. And I basically discovered your work when I was watching telly, because you were on the vegetarian or vegan cooking show. What is it called again? With the two...
Living on the Veg.
Living on the Veg. That's right. And I saw you and I was so amazed by what you made. On there you made almost like an egg replacement sort of dish with chickpeas.
Yes, exactly. So
I was amazed. It was so good.
Chickpeas are amazing, let's be honest.
They are brilliant. Like my partner is obsessed with chickpeas, and he's always shouting at me because I don't have any in stock when I'm in the UK. And he's like, "How can you not have chickpeas? They're the one thing you need to stock up with." Oh, for God's sake! But I was just amazed by how you can use the waste of the chickpeas, the kind of like liquid left in a can, to then replace eggs. And I think that's just genius. And there's so many tricks and tips that you can learn when you want to move away from using animal produce. I think that a lot of people are now starting to get aware that there's not just health reasons for this. There's not just like the animal cruelty side of things, but there's so much in this. And you mentioned intuitive cooking. And do you want to talk a bit... Excuse me. Do you want to talk a little bit about more how this all kind of links together, the plant-based side of things, using your intuition to cook, and how that kind of brought you to call your website and your brand The Food Witch?
Sure. So the whole idea behind The Food Witch is well, I guess it's twofold. Firstly, I think there is a growing generation of women in sort of life coaching and business coaching and lifestyle and food that are, instead of being feminist or being patriarchal, are now embracing our intuition and promoting both the feminine and masculine energies that we all have within us, and owning the fact that feminine energy is one of the most powerful and wonderful things that the world has to offer. And that, for me, is really what a witch is. It's just that feminine energy and that intuitive sort of, a woman's intuition, right? It's a very, very common phrase. And so I think there's a lot of people now that are just embracing that idea, and I wanted to sort of just make a statement and put my nail on the wall there and just sort of say, this is really what I think I do. But it's also something that a lot of people sort of level at me when I make food, like with my other half, for example. Often I'm quite indecisive, she's quite indecisive. Often we'll have this like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know, what do you want for dinner? And often it's just like, rather than what do we want, what do we have, the way that I make decisions about food is like, how do you feel? And there are so many times when I will just get a sense of what the right meal is to make for either of our moods or our situations or the day that we've had. And, you know, I'll make something really simple, like a soup or a stew or a bowl of pasta, but it'll just be like the right thing for that moment. And, you know, I get this, you know, you're such a witch in the kitchen kind of leveled at me, because it's just like, you know, knowing what exactly is going to like connect to you, mind, body and soul, food-wise in that moment is kind of my gift, I guess. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to embody with that title. And I think I often don't make enough of how magical food is. Like I try and put everything into this framework of logic and reason, and you know, intuition is the opposite of that, and you can't rationalize it. And so I'm trying to, as well as, you know, sharing it with the world, it's part of my own personal journey of becoming more intuitive in life more generally, as well as with food, and sort of making it as relevant and as weighty in my decision making as my logic and my reason, because I think all of those things are important, and there is this sort of mass awakening and now of those things coming to the forefront. And I just think it's the right time to sort of put that message around it and share it in that way with people.
That's so true. There's been such a wave of people just becoming aware of mindfulness practices, and it's very funny because there is such a thing when you're cooking and you're not paying attention. I always joke with my mum, because my mum cannot cook. She could not cook a bowl of cereal. She couldn't prepare a bowl of cereal. I promise you, she is absolutely bonkers. And when we were younger, this is an example, she was trying to, I think she had like 6 months off work, and she was trying to do like homemade meals for me and my sister. So we had this girl around that was my sister's friend, and she started to prepare all this, like, it was like a pea kind of sauce for pasta, right? Very straightforward. So she didn't realise you were meant to cook the peas. So she just blended raw peas, and she gave it to this girl who just looked at it like there was like grass basically in a pot. And it's because she doesn't pay attention. She's not present when she's cooking. She's like following the instructions, but she doesn't like want to be involved with it. She finds it like a burden, and like she just doesn't, she's not clicked into when you're cooking. And I think that's the difference between when you get good food and crazily bad food. It's just being present.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And it's so similar to when you're meditating. It's like when you're in that moment and you're just paying attention to the now, things come out well more than not. And even if they're not like amazingly cooked, they just, things energetically just work out. And I love that element of food. Do you think about things in more of a spiritual way, or do you also apply things like nutritional ways? Like, I know there are some like holistic benefits of certain spices, like whether turmeric, a lot of people are using it as remedies and things like that at the moment. Now we're in the lockdown and so on. Do you think about that side of it as well, or just thinking about the energy when you're cooking?
So I think it's hard not to, even subconsciously somehow, right? There's so much of it, from the really negative stuff around diet culture to really great information about nutrition. It's everywhere, and it's something that the media promote a lot of information about. So I think it's hard to ignore it completely. But I guess what I've done is I've made a conscious decision not to bring nutrition into it from the perspective of, I think it's very well covered already.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of people that work in the field of nutrition, but also because of this reason that it's so tied up with diet culture. It's so tied up with both science and myth that I think it's very easy to be caught up in things that may or may not be true, things that may or may not work. And a lot of what it comes down to is actually where our intuitive connection to food offers these things anyway. And so I think, sure, like you can do all of that reading and all of that research and have a list of things that are anti-inflammatory and this and that. But what it does is it for me, the impact on your mindset is far more damaging than any nutritional benefit you get from sort of obsessing about all of that stuff. So I think it's really about, if you're going to do it, I think it's about balance. But I also have this belief that if you see food as something you have a relationship with, and something that is part of your entire well-being, and not just your physical well-being, and it's your mental well-being and your spiritual well-being as well. And it's work. Like, it's still work that's ongoing for me and everyone that I know is on this path. It's a constant not effort, but it's constant progress. Like, you're never finished, you never fully complete it all. It's a path that we're all on. It's a journey that we're all on, becoming more intuitive, becoming more conscious. But I think that's the long-term and sustainable way to do it. And sure, like, a lot of the things that might be nutritionally or holistically promoted, like turmeric or eating green vegetables or eating whole grains, I think if you really take the time and effort to listen to your body, to cook your food, to engage with your food when you're eating it, and how you feel afterwards, then eventually you can combine all of those, the sweet treats that make you feel good emotionally, the green veg that make you feel really energized and ready to attack your day. All of those things can sort of be put into balance from your own personal perspective, rather than needing to, because I just feel like as soon as we start looking externally, we start imposing rules on ourselves, which is so psychologically damaging to our mindset with food, that I think, for me, the way to go around it is just replace that with seeking out more of the good stuff.
That's so true. That's so true, because it's not fear driven anymore. It's about using. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think people forget we're putting food into our bodies have reactions, but instead of listening to the reactions our body's actually showing me, we look at instructions and websites that give us information. It's well, why are you looking outside of yourself? You could find out that information. If you eat something and it doesn't work for you, don't eat it again.
Exactly. I mean, a really good example of that is an allergy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there are tests to tell you if you're allergic to something, but the way that you find out normally is you eat it and it gives you a reaction that makes you sick. And whether it's an allergy or a bloating or a feeling great or feeling excited, there are so many things that food can make you feel, and just by acknowledging them, you can have that same relationship with every food as you would, you can rank order them in your intuitive sense, how well you get on with them. And then you naturally just gravitate to a pattern of eating that makes you feel great. And I think if you concentrate on that, feeling joy, feeling vital, and I don't like to use the word healthy or unhealthy, because again, they're so tied up with diet culture. So I'm sort of trying to champion this word vital.
Yes.
And that's what I want out of my food. I want to feel vital. And it might be that it's a combination of chocolate cake and spinach and pasta, and that's totally fine. If I feel good and I have energy and I have mental clarity and I can do the things that I want to do and I enjoy what I'm eating and I feel satisfied at the end of it, that is that's the perfect diet for me.
Yes, I think that's so wise. When I look at your food, and you have a wonderful Instagram that everyone can follow, which is at Food Witch Sal, you present in a very you don't fuss things. They are what they are beautifully presented. And is that part of your creation process? When you use beautiful flowers on things and it just is this is the beautiful earthy feel of it. Do you cook with your eyes, if you know what I mean? Do you prepare with that in mind?
Funnily enough, I think in a roundabout way, yes. But I think the one thing that I've really had to accept is what looks nice to me. So, I worked in high-end catering in Michelin restaurants, and I've been trained in how to present food in certain ways, and also how to, over-engineer things to look a certain way. And I spent a long time thinking that I needed to do that because that was the way that food was meant to be, and that's what people wanted, and that's what would sell, and that was sort of in my previous unintuitive incarnation. And now what I truly believe and what I think comes through in my food is that, for me, what looks appetizing is something that looks like what it is. It looks delicious. It looks like the thing that it came from. It looks like a part of nature. I can identify the ingredients and the cooking process just by looking at it. And it doesn't look unnatural or overly manicured or shapen in a particular way. And if it's decorated or garnished, it's with something that is natural and has flavour.
Yes, I
and
love
if
it.
that's not possible, I just don't garnish stuff. Like, you know, if it needs a micro herb and I can't get the right micro herb and the one that I have won't taste right, it doesn't get a micro herb. Like, that's kind of ultimately, it should taste amazing. And there's no way you can dress it up to look good or bad. If it tastes great, it tastes great, and that's what matters.
Absolutely. I've got massive hands, which is stupid to say, but I was mesmerized by one of the it was like I think it was made of beetroot, and it was presented as like a beautiful rose with these delicate like it was on your Instagram, and I sent it to my partner, and I was like, I could never do this. If I made this, I'd have to make like a huge like bush, because I can't imagine being that precise with my hands being so big. But it's such an articulate presentation. I was so amazed by it. It's very inspiring to me.
It's one of those things as well. I think I always describe myself as heavy-handed and clumsy, and actually,
what?
That's not. I know that now that's not true, and I'm quite dexterous and all of that stuff. But a lot of it, I think, is psychological, and because I have quite big hands, I have very warm hands, and so, you know, I trained a lot as a pastry chef when I first started out in restaurants, and that's like the worst thing you can have as a pastry chef. But actually, now I just believe that that's not an issue, and just carry on, and it's all fine.
I'll have to try and adopt that.
Everything in life is about mindset, I'm discovering now.
Yes. If you believe it will happen. I have to stop telling myself that I'm too big for things, I think. It's the problem of being 6 foot something in heels. So if you said this dish sums up my cooking to the T, what dish would you prepare?
Oh, that is a very difficult question. Let me have a think. Well, one of the things that I really love to cook, and I guess does kind of... Oh, actually, this is a really good one. I've got it. It's my dal. And it's got a really good story behind it as well. So I make dal all the time. It's super easy. It's quick. Even if you don't have all the ingredients, you usually have enough of them that you can get something good out of it. And it doesn't require a lot of fresh stuff. So sometimes if there's nothing else around, it's quite easy to make. And I just make tons of it and stick it in the freezer. It's also a really nice sort of cleansing, leveling first meal to have on a retreat. So again, I make it quite a lot for the retreats. And my current sort of signature dal that I make all the time is made from this spice mix that my grandma makes. And I went round to her, she lives with my mum, I went round there long ago, long before the pandemic, and she was making this dish, which is a pilau rice made with peas. It's one of my favourite dishes. It's just rice and peas and potatoes, delicious.
Yum.
And it has this spice mix in it, and I've never made this dish before. Why did you make dal out of it? Like, if you're making dal, you should do this, and if you're making this dish, you should do this. And I tried to explain to her that, you know, as soon as I smelt it, I just smelt dal, and I wanted to turn it into dal, and that was just like intuitively what I wanted to do. And every time she's like, you know, you shouldn't do it. So anyway, I made this delicious dal out of this spice mix for months and months and months and months. And then I went on a retreat to Cornwall and gave some to as a gift to this lady that runs a farm that we go and visit. And she sent me a message that evening, having eaten it for dinner, and said, I'm having a debate with my husband. Is this your grandma's recipe for dal, or is this your own intuitive version? We can't decide. And I just replied, and I was like, it's both. Like, I don't know how to disentangle those two things. Like, it's her spice mix for something else that I use in dal. And it was just so funny how perfectly those two things came across in what I was doing. Like, it's a very intuitive thing. It's my own recipe that mixes, like, 3 ways of making dal with a spice mix intended for something else. Yeah, it is so reminiscent of like my grandma and the food that we grew up eating that that all of that came across in one go. And like my dal is almost like a yardstick for my mood, because if I'm like in a bad mood and I make what I call now angry dal, and it's like really spicy and really peppery because I'm just angry, and it gets all of my anger and all of the spice in it. And so dal is one of my favourites and something that I make all the time. And it's my go-to comfort food as well.
That does sound delicious. I would love to try your food one day. What actually takes place on one of your retreats, and what different retreats do you offer when we get out of this pandemic lockdown?
Yeah, so when we get out of the house again, so I host retreats that are basically centered around using food, yoga, and meditation as tools for mindful living. And I work with a yoga teacher who is also trained in Pilates and personal training and nutrition and all sorts of things, and is constantly adding more strings to her bow. And so as we sort of gain more knowledge and work on ourselves, we sort of expand the offering within the retreat. And it's basically like, how have, the things that we've learned living in London, living in this sort of urban rat race, to affect practical spirituality and mindfulness in our lives that don't require you to sit in a field naked, that don't require you to meditate for 7 hours in silence, but that you can do even if you've only got 15 minutes a day to dedicate to yourself, and you can make meaningful changes to how you feel, your mindset and your relationship with yourself, and kind of, pragmatic, practical ways to do it. And because food is the way that I find a lot of that has transferred to me, that's one of the mechanisms that we offer on those retreats. So we go and visit a farm and we do like a field to fork harvest, cooking and eating experience, and it's just absolutely magical. And I run a couple of those a year, and then I basically team up with practitioners of all sorts from all over the place, doing retreats that they host and I then cook on. So I work with a couple of life coaches, I work with a bunch of yoga teachers, I worked with a shaman earlier this year, and it's just basically anything that involves, mindfulness and looking inward and self-development, where for me, like, as soon as people are called to connect to their intuition, the food that I make on the retreat connects to them also. And that's why I love to cook on retreats, because it's a moment where what I do and what they're doing sort of really have an opportunity to connect. And, selfishly, I love feeding people who are primed to enjoy my food, because that energetic transfer is all easier to do if somebody is in that right headspace.
What did you do with the shaman?
So she does ritual cacao ceremony. So it was a full moon retreat with a cacao ceremony and yoga and sound and gong baths. So it was just like a real connecting back to nature and yourself and all of these different energies and the moon. And we had this big fire and sort of offered our desires and gratitude to the moon, and just reconnecting back to all of the energy and all of nature and stuff. It was amazing, actually. Kind of sounds a bit wacky, but it was awesome.
Oh no, I'm so intrigued.
It's really good.
I'm a learned person, so I might ask you if you could link me to her details after, just to check her out.
Yeah, I'll write that down right now.
Thank you.
She's absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. So I'm super, super, super grateful that you took the time to speak to me about all you do, and you're so amazing. Hopefully I will be able to come to one of your workshops, because I'd love to learn some more techniques and things in the future. So when we're out of lockdown, I will come.
Well, they're online now, so you've got no excuse.
We could do an online one. That's so true. I have to talk to my partner about this. It's very exciting. I really like on your website, you have this beautiful image of, I think it's a watermelon, with this stunning salad. What is that one, before I wrap up?
Yeah, no, that is a very good thing to know. So that is one of my favourite dishes for the summer. And the reason I love it so much is because it's a barbecue dish.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you've ever tried barbecued watermelon, but it's absolutely delicious. And
so yummy.
If you're... Sorry, go on.
No, I just love it. I'm agreeing with you. It's delicious.
I think particularly for people that have been missing meat and are trying to find things that give them that satisfaction without using substitutes, it's actually a really, really good one. So basically it's just like thick slices of watermelon that you leave the rind on, and you just lightly season and oil them, and just like char them really briefly on a really hot either barbecue or griddle pan, just so you get those nice dark lines on both sides. And then you make this sort of fresh salsa. So it's got avocado, cucumber, jalapeno chilies, lime, coriander, dill, and then dried cumin and coriander. And you kind of just make this salad and serve it with the watermelon, and it's just delicious.
Oh
so
my
good.
God, my mouth is watering just thinking about it. That sounds so yummy with the jalapenos.
And whenever someone's like, because I don't know if you've ever heard of the big green egg barbecues, but I bought one for my 30th birthday, which was a very long time ago. And I was eating meat at the time. So you can like slow cook meat on it. It's incredible. Like slow cooked meat on that thing is just out of this world. You can make pizza, you can make bread. It's just the best thing ever. But you know, when I stopped eating meat, it's like, what do I do with this barbecue? And so making like amazing vegetarian and vegan barbecue has been one of the things that I really have taken on as a project, because I love barbecue, but also like a lot of my friends and family would be like, we don't want to come to your house for a barbecue because you don't eat meat. And so every time I come across something that's just like amazing vegetarian or vegan barbecue, that like becomes a staple, because then I know people come over and I can make it and they'll be impressed, and I can sort of be smug that they didn't eat meat and they still had a good barbecue.
That's definitely a test. If you can make good barbecue vegetarian food, instead of like what? Oh God, I went to this barbecue when I was a kid, and because I didn't eat meat. All I got was a corn on the cob. That was it.
That's not fair.
That's not fair. I was like, you could have given me a halloumi or something.
Yeah,
Jesus.
exactly. I mean, halloumi on the barbecue, winner.
Winner. All right then, my love. Thank you so much for chit-chatting to me, and I'll add all your details and your links, and you can be found at thefoodwitch.uk and the Foodwitch Sal on Instagram, and definitely check out all your wonderful courses and retreats coming up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to chat to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Agitprop Interviews. It was a pleasure to discuss a little bit of Sal and her history and where she came from in terms of her food story. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. See you in the next episode, and check out all the links below.